Hi everyone, welcome to my pool plan video in DFFOO global version of the game, and this time I'll be covering banners and events where Ceodore will be featured as the synergy unit. You can also refer to the cropped infographic on the left hand side of the slide, which was derived from Jakematt's global forecast to see which events these are. Before starting the video, just a quick introduction about the purpose of the video. This video shares my plans for upcoming banners as well as my thought process into how I make my decisions as to whether to pull or skip certain banners. Of course, this is heavily biased towards my playstyle and preferences, and it may or may not be ideal for you. I also do not cover every single character. I mostly cover characters who receive new weapons or have the upgrades during the arc. As always, whether to pull or skip is a very individualized decision, and is always based on several different factors such as your resources and your playstyle. There are many different approaches to playing the game, and I strongly believe that there is no one best approach into whether to pull or skip. First of all, just a quick tally about how I did during Gilgamesh's LDBT arc. Now there were 4 key banners during that arc. We had Gilgamesh LDBT, we had Kafka BT which was featured alongside him, and then we had Yuri in his Intersecting Wills, and lastly the debut of Layla. As you can see, I actually skipped 3 of the 4 banners, and I spent tickets on Layla mainly aiming for her LD. It was a pleasant surprise for me because they actually inserted Ignis into this banner. In JP, it was actually Vanille on this banner. I did not actually have Ignis's LD, and the 100 tickets that I spent actually snagged me Ignis's LD, Layla's EX and Layla's LD, which was really a big win in my book. Alright, so coming up on the first event on this arc, we have firstly the Heretics event featuring the rerun of Ceodore's LD, but this time Ceodore will have his PT newly released, and alongside him we also have Science LD newly released. There is a second banner on this event featuring the rerun of Tidus LDBT. Now in JP they did feature Ignis on this banner, but seeing that we did get Ignis on Layla's banner, it is still a question mark on who the second LD is on this banner. Although having said that, I highly suspect that it might be Bash coming back alongside Tidus here. First up on Ceodore, his C90 does give him a much harder hitting EX, as with all C90 upgrades. His BT aura is actually quite decent. First of all, it does preserve him in his awakening state, and it does give decently good auras to the entire party as well, although half of the auras are dependent on whether or not you have 50% or more max HP. But assuming you hit the HP requirement, it does give pretty fat auras, focusing mainly on brave damage done. His aura does provide up to 100% brave damage increase if you fulfill the conditions. I think the main drawback though on his aura is that it does not increase the HP damage cap, which certain key auras, BT auras do, as the key being Garnet, and of course we also have Ramza coming up. Next up we have Cyan, who alongside his newly released LD also receives hefty reworks across all his kit. Now his LD is one of the hardest hitting attacks in the entire game, but it does come with a massive downside. It requires him to have 7 stacks of his LD overhead, and he starts off with only at stack 1, and he only gains 1 stack every time he gets a turn, which actually means that he needs to take 6 turns before you can even use his LD, which in my mind is a massive downside. The one good thing about his LD is that if you use it as a call ability, you can instantly use his LD call, and it is the hardest hitting LD call ability in the game. Lastly, on the second banner, I only talk about Tidus because we don't know who the second character will be yet. Tidus receives a small rework, but his rework only upgrades his shot follow-up attack and his jack shot follow-up attack, in the sense that it increases the number of brave hits that's done by his follow-up attacks. His BT Plus does open quite an interesting avenue of play for Tidus, in the sense that you can then go BT Plus first to get his BT Aura and then go into BT mode with his BT Aura active. And if you recall, his BT Aura actually allows him to use shot twice after every attack, which leads to very significant damage all in one BT mode. The other good thing I guess about Tidus is that he is a turn hogger, and with Garnet currently available in the global version of the game, she heavily favors turn hoggers in her playstyle, and Tidus is actually a pretty good fit alongside with Garnet. Now that being said, I already have Tidus up to his LD, and I don't really have any interest in chasing on a single banner just for a BT weapon, so I will be giving Tidus banner a skip. As for Ceodore banner, I also already have Ceodore's kit up to his LD, and I really don't have a lot of interest in Ceodore's BT or with Science LD, so Ceodore's banner is also a skip for me. Now on JP version of the game, roughly around this time, they also did release Cloud of Darkness's BT rerun alongside with Kid Sith LD on a single banner. None of these characters on this banner receive any C90 upgrade or any massive rework, so it is really a rerun banner of sorts. Cloud of Darkness herself is a powerful magic DPS character featuring rebreaks, delay and off-turn damage. I do have her green already, and she is fairly good if you are still in the market for a magic DPS character. Kid Sith on the other hand, as a main party support, I really think that there are many better options currently available, especially if of course you pulled for Garnet during the 4th anniversary event. I must say Kid Sith doesn't have a lot going for him. He does guarantee crits for the party, and he does have a unique mechanic where he enables you to regen Brave for every Brave hit that you do. One thing that I must say though is that Kid Sith as an LD call ability is very useful, because he does have a unique LD call ability which provides your party 2 turns where you will get self-brave battery for every single brave hit that you do, and I actually use his LD call ability quite a lot in my runs. As for my plans, I will be skipping this banner, but the main reason for that is I already have every single weapon on this banner, so there's nothing that interests me here. Next up, we have Rem being featured in her Intersecting Will event. Now Rem, I think, did receive a rework and a newly released LD that fixes a lot of issues with her kit. First off, with her rework, her cure ability now heals the entire party and will also not contribute to the turn count, which is going to be similar with her swap turn ability, so you can use S1 or S2 on her turn and the turn count will remain the same. Her swap turn will also now recharge your target's EX meter by 20%, which actually helps quite a lot, especially with the C90 era where EX will deal quite a lot of damage. To top it all off, her LD is very good in my opinion, in the sense that it gives her a new buff called Magic Absorb that will trigger a follow-up attack from her every time she ends her turn, which is quite good considering most of the time you'll be using cure or swap turns with Rem, and typically those actually does not end with any HP dump. That used to be an issue with her because you sort of lose DPS anytime that she gets her turn, and her LD really fixes that in a long way, and her being able to donate her turns without increasing the turn count can be potentially broken in my opinion, depending on who you partner her with. Also, her LD follow-up attack will grant the next party member after her 1 turn of Brave and HP damage cap up and a 30% Brave floor, meaning that that character's current Brave will not be able to drop below 30% for 1 turn. This pairs very nicely with her swap turns because you can then swap turn to your target of choice and grant this boost to that target. And imagine her pairing with key DPS characters such as Machina, and you can see how good she can potentially be. I guess the only drawback with Rem is that she's not really plug and play. You need to build a good party around her, but if you did manage to put her alongside teammates that will value her swap turn utility, she will do fairly well. Alongside with Rem, we also have a rerun of Cypher with his LD, and Cypher himself will also receive a rework across all his skills. His rework is mainly there to bump up his damage to the current meta in C90 era, and overall I think he becomes quite a decent unit where his C90 makes him a decent DPS unit with delay utility. To me, this will be the key banner on this arc that I will be aiming for a few reasons. Firstly, like I said, I really like Rem with what her rework and LD weapon does to her kit, and she is fairly unique in her mechanic in the sense that she's the only unit in the game that can swap turns with another unit. On top of that, I also actually do not have Cypher's LD, so his LD being on the same banner as Rem is a big bonus for me. I'm also at ticket cap, so I do need to spend my tickets somewhere on this arc, and I think this is the best place, so for that reason I will be using tickets until I score both Rem and Cypher's LD. Next up, we have Boss Rush 7 featuring the release of Fang's LD, and she will also be receiving her C90 upgrade and a massive rework. Now Fang has always been somewhat of an underperforming unit throughout the 35 CP era and even the EX era, because her kit seems to always be a little bit lackluster and eventually surpassed by other units. She does receive a massive rework where she gets significantly more skill users across her kit, and her damage across her S1, S2 and of course her EX is sort of bumped up to the current era or current meta. The good thing is that her S2 is now a guaranteed launch, so they've removed the conditional for the launch, where it used to be that you have to hit a broken target or break the target in order to do the launch. Her max brave down and defense down debuff from her S1 is also doubled in potency. It used to be 25% and will now be 50% moving forward. With her LD, she inflicts the same debuffs that her S1 can inflict, with one additional debuff called Daze. Daze is a 3-turn disable with a 40% brave and HP damage up tagged to it, so that seems pretty hefty, but it does function in the same way as Edward's Sleep in the sense that each time the target takes a turn or each time you hit the target with a brave attack, the duration will go down by 1. Now the 40% brave and HP damage up on the Daze debuff is certainly nothing to sneeze at. However, in my opinion, I think the 3-turn of the disable is a massive downside for her, especially considering that doing any brave or HP damage to the target will reduce the duration by 1 turn. 3 turns is really not a lot, and if you have turn hoggers for example, it will fall off pretty quickly. Even Edwards, when he had his sleep debut where it lasted 5 turns, most of the time you'll only have the enemies disabled for 2 turns with Edward, maybe 3 if you really plan around optimal use. Very rarely you see the enemies disabled for 4 or 5 turns. So with Fang having just 3 turns on her Daze debuff, to me it's very questionable on how much value you can actually get out of that. Now overall, I think her kit is pretty decent, but the question that I have for myself is, do I really want to spend resources on a unit that is somewhat decent? She does have okay debuffs, but at this point of the game, many characters can also have 50% potency debuff. She can launch, but so can many other characters in the game. So while she does have all of it in one character, none of what she can do is really unique to herself, and there are even characters that can probably do a better job than her in terms of debuff, launch or disables. Beatrix, who is featured alongside Fang, will not be getting any rework, but the C90 upgrade that Beatrix gets does provide her with a massive upgrade to her EX, the buff coming from her EX, as well as the Holy Knight protection that she gets, which will now last for 2 turns and will also heal the entire party. I actually think Beatrix herself is a decent unit, even though her S1 and S2 does not receive a rework. she is still one of the better dispellers in the game. For me though, my plan is to actually skip this banner, mainly because I already have all of Beatrix's gear, so I don't need her LD, and I really don't find a lot of use for Fang in my current roster. I already have quite a lot of other characters who can do mostly what she can do, so I don't see much point in spending resources for Fang. Lastly, on this part of the video, I'll be covering on what my opinion is on the top picks for the arc if you have limited resources in who you can actually chase for. Now the way I do it is to split the characters across 3 categories. The first is the good value category, so to speak, where I think the characters here would likely give you value regardless of who else you have in your roster. Next up, we have the role fulfillment category, where the characters are decent and can potentially provide good value, but this is a little bit more dependent on who else you have in your roster, because you could potentially have other characters that can do similar things to these characters. Lastly are the consolation prize category. Nothing bad about the characters here, it's just that if you can only chase some of the characters on the arc, the characters in this category I think offers relatively less value compared to the other characters released around the same time. No matter who you go for though, one big disclaimer that I put at the bottom here is to always focus on roles that fills gaps in your roster, so the value can actually change depending on who else you have built up, and of course the playstyle that you like to employ during battle. So first up on the good value category. Now this time I actually don't think that there are any characters who are truly good value, but I think there are 2 characters that are a little bit better than the other characters under the role fulfillment category, and these 2 characters are Tidus and Rem. Tidus I think is not really that much needed because we've just gone through a few weeks of banners featuring solid DPS options such as Machina, Null, and Lock. But if you missed any of these characters and you really want a good DPS unit, Tidus is quite excellent at what he does, especially with the rework on shot, and he pairing very nicely with Garnet as well. Rem I think is quite a solid option as well because she is quite unique in her kit, and her rework and her LD really fixes a lot of issues that she had in the past. I would have said that she's a solid good value option, but I actually think her value is a little bit diminished by the release of Garnet, mainly because with Garnet you don't really need another key support unit currently in the party, and there is one more support unit coming up really soon in the form of Ramza, and if you want to somehow squeeze Ramza and Garnet together, then there really isn't a lot of space for Rem. So relatively speaking, with Garnet being a top tier support, I think Rem's value is a little bit diminished. Doesn't really make her bad, but I still think she's still quite a solid option if you really want to find a place to sink in your resources on this arc. Next up is the role fulfillment category, and I have 4 units in this category, which is Beatrix, Ceodore, Cypher, and Cloud of Darkness. Now all 4 of these characters have certain utility in their kit, and I think their value depends on what utility you need the most. So for example, Beatrix is still one of the better buff dispellers in the game. Ceodore actually also has healing and debuff cleansing in his kit. Cypher has AoE delay, and Cloud of Darkness actually has often damage in her BT aura and 3-turn delay tied to her kit. She's also one of the 2 characters in the game that has 3-turn delay, the other being Quistis. Which one you go for, I think is going to be a bit dependent on what sort of utility you need to round off your kit. So for example, if you feel that you lack a good buff dispeller, then Beatrix is a good pickup. If you need someone with AoE delay, then Cypher's your guy. Or if you need often DPS, then Cloud of Darkness is quite decent, but do keep in mind that you do need to invest BT ingots in her to make her really worthwhile. So lastly, on the consolation prize category, I have 3 units here. First off, we have Cyan, And I think Cyan's biggest downfall is that his LD requires 7 stacks of his overhead and him required to take 6 turns before you can unleash massive damage. 6 turns is really too long in my opinion. You can do something like pair him with Rem to quickly give him many turns, but really why you go to all that trouble when you can just use other top tier meta units and end the Lufenia Plus stage, which is endgame content in less than 10 turns. Next up with Fang. I think Fang becomes somewhat usable with a C90 upgrade and her massive rework, but the issue with Fang really is her kit I think still remains pretty lackluster. A lot of what she can do, many other characters can also do, and her days debuff does sound interesting, but I think in terms of practical use, it's very difficult to rely on. Lastly, for Kate Sith, as a main party support, I think Kate Sith's kit is a little bit underwhelming, and we have many great support options. We recently have Garnet, you have Rem on this same arc, and we have Ramza coming up as well, so there's really not a lot of incentive to pull for Kate Sith. And even if you do pull for him, it is very likely that he won't be joining you in his main party, in your main party. I do have to say though that his LD call ability is still one of the better LD call abilities in the game. The only question is whether or not he is worth the investment just to be used as an LD call ability. And for that I think it's really up to you, but I already have his LD call. I just don't know whether he's going to be worth it just for a call ability. Anyway, that's it for this video. Overall, quite a straightforward arc for me. I'll be essentially skipping all banners except for the Rem and Cypher banner, where I will be investing tickets until I score both of their LDs. As always, I hope the video has been helpful, and if you enjoy the content, please leave a like, comment or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!